In a time when the shadows of uncertainty mingled with the hope of a new dawn, the atmosphere on earth was laden with omens and subtle signs that escaped the perception of most. Among the few who listened attentively to the murmurs of the Spirit were those who, even without complete mastery of divine mysteries, sensed that something greater was coming. In this setting, where the everyday intertwined with the transcendent, the words of Jesus gained a meaning that went far beyond common teachings. In remote corners, in secret meetings and whispered conversations by wells and olive trees, echoes of 3 prophecies spread, revealing a vision of the end times that few dared to fully comprehend. The narrative unfolded in a land marked both by the serene beauty of its landscapes and the scars of ancient battles and injustices. People living on the fringes of great cities, whose lives were shaped by tradition and faith, found in the Master's words an ambiguous message, full of warnings and consolation. While some heard only the outlines of morality and universal love, others captured a deeper dimension, a call to decipher the enigmas that pointed to the final destiny of humanity. Among these few initiates were individuals who, even with doubt pulsating in their hearts, were driven by a sense of urgency that made them seek the hidden truth in the recesses of sacred writings and oral teachings. Amid this context, the 3 prophecies stood out not only for their enigmatic content, but also for the way they challenged the conventions of the time. The first prophecy spoke of a period of great tribulations, where nations would be torn apart by conflicts and natural calamities. The desert winds and the murmur of turbulent waters carried the premonition of a radical transformation, as if the earth itself were crying out for justice and redemption. This vision was not merely an announcement of destruction, but an invitation to introspection, a call for each individual to look within and find the strength to face the internal challenges reflected in the outer world. The second prophecy delved even deeper into the spiritual dimensions, revealing that the end of the world would not occur solely on a physical level, but that there would be a rupture in the connection between the visible and the invisible. It was as if the veils separating the real from the ethereal were about to tear, allowing ancient energies and forces to meet in a chaotic yet harmonious dance. Those who truly understood Jesus' message saw in this prophecy an invitation to transcend the limitations of matter and venture into territories where the sacred and the profane merged in a mysterious symbiosis. Thus, the appeal extended to all who longed for a broader understanding of the cosmos, a call to look beyond the immediate and recognize that every event, no matter how terrible it seemed, carried a meaning that resonated in spiritual realms. The third and final prophecy carried an enigmatic promise, that of a rebirth, not only of the earth, but of the human spirit itself. Within this announcement lay the seed of a transformation that defied the cycle of life and death, suggesting that even in the face of imminent apocalypse, there would be the possibility of a new era. This message, steeped in symbolism and rich with nuances, hinted that the end times would paradoxically be the beginning of a higher existence where lost knowledge would be recovered and the true essence of the divine revealed to those who had eyes to see and hearts to feel. For those devoted to the quest for truth, this rebirth presented an opportunity to transcend the limitations imposed by a narrow view of the world, embracing the complexity and beauty of a constantly transforming universe. In the alleyways of small villages and the corners of large cities, debates and discussions arose as Jesus' message spread clandestinely. Some religious leaders, fearful that such interpretations might destabilize the established order, sought to silence the bearers of this new vision. However, truth, by its very nature, is untamable, and even the harshest repression could not extinguish the light of those who saw beyond the obvious. It was a time of secret meetings, of whispered words in the shadows, where disciples of a greater truth gathered to share their insights and meditate on the mysteries that were revealed. In a small house situated by a silent river, a group of followers regularly gathered. Among them were people from diverse backgrounds, farmers who saw in the changing weather a reflection of spiritual transformations, artisans who, through their creations, expressed the internal struggle between good and evil, and even some members of the elite who sought refuge amidst the apparent chaos of the world. Each meeting was marked by long conversations about enigmatic passages, where not only the literal meaning of the words was discussed, but also their mystical implications. There was an atmosphere of reverence where the beauty of language and the power of symbols merged to create an experience that transcended the ordinary. Amid these discussions emerged an old master, whose eyes seemed to have witnessed past eras, becoming the central figure of these gatherings. His voice, deep and serene, carried an authority that could not be taught, only felt. He spoke of a time when humanity walked side by side with the divine, when the boundaries between the sacred and the profane were thin and flexible. To him, Jesus' prophecies were not mere warnings, but invitations to a spiritual awakening, a call for each being to reconnect with its true essence. His words were like seeds cast to the wind, destined to take root in the hearts of those brave enough to question the established reality. As the Master spoke, images formed in the minds of his listeners, visions of storms sweeping through entire cities, skies opening in cascades of light, and a horizon where the end and the beginning met in an eternal dance. Each account was interwoven with the personal narrative of the listener, as if every individual carried within themselves a spark of that great mystery. There was a sense that time was not linear, but a continuous cycle, where the past was reflected in the present and the future hid within the interstices of the now. Within these moments of contemplation also arose fear, the fear of the unknown, of what lay hidden beyond the veil, which permeated the conversations. But paradoxically, this very fear sparked a flame of hope, an unwavering desire to uncover the truth, regardless of the risks. Those who dared to look inward and question the established order found the strength to transcend the limitations of fear, seeing in the prophecies an opportunity to rewrite not only their lives, but the destiny of all humanity. The streets, markets, and fields were silent witnesses to the changes beginning to take shape. While the political and religious elite attempted to maintain order and preserve dogmas, the murmurs of a new era gained strength among the humblest. There was an inexplicable connection between those living on the margins and the teachings of Jesus, as if destiny itself had reserved for them the role of catalysts in a spiritual revolution. In every glance, in every gesture, one could feel the tension between what was old and the promise of a transformative future. In this climate of expectation, the world seemed suspended between tradition and innovation, between the comfort of old certainties and the uncontrollable drive for change that felt urgent. The Master's words, imbued with wisdom and a profound sense of mission, echoed as a call to action. He taught that true knowledge was not found in books or rituals, but in the authentic living of the mystery, in the courage to embrace one's own vulnerability, and in the willingness to face challenges with an open heart. Every word spoken was an invitation for the spirit to break free from the chains of conformity, allowing the light of truth to illuminate the darkest corners of existence. Thus, in that period when the destiny of humanity seemed to hang by a fragile thread, the echoes of the three prophecies intertwined into a unique and transformative narrative. Even if few fully understood the meaning of each message, everyone felt, in some way, that something irrevocable was about to happen. There was a sense of urgency, a silent call that invoked the courage of each being to face what was coming, with the conviction that in the end, the spiritual journey would be the true legacy of an era of darkness and light. As night deepened and silence fell over the villages and hamlets, the faces of the faithful reflected not only the tranquility of unwavering faith, but also the unease of those who knew that every second carried the possibility of an awakening. And so, in that corner of ancient times, the narrative of the prophecies began, a story marked by meetings, doubts, profound meditations, and the eternal quest for the hidden truth that united man with the divine. As the nights passed with renewed intensity, and the murmuring conversations among the faithful grew increasingly deep and enigmatic, the group that gathered in that small house by the river began to realize that the Master's words, once shrouded in an aura of comfort and mystery, carried a weight that multiplied with each passing day. The atmosphere transformed as the silence of the nights gave way to heated discussions and unexpected revelations. The tension, once subtle, now permeated the air, as if every breath was laden with omens and ancient secrets. During one of these meetings, as the moon cast its silvery light on the scattered leaves on the ground, a young disciple with an intense gaze and a restless soul took the floor. With a trembling voice, he recounted an experience he had while walking along a dirt trail. In the midst of the vast countryside, among the elongated shadows of the elm trees, the young man had witnessed a disturbing vision, a thick cloud, not of rain, but of a dense and luminous mist, which seemed to pulse as if it contained the very heart of an unnameable mystery. According to him, the vision was intertwined with a feeling of urgency and a distant echo, as if the voices of ancestors were crying out for justice and redemption. His words, imbued with emotion, sparked a new questioning among all those present. Could that sign be a premonition of the unfolding of the prophesied events? While some absorbed the words with an almost religious reverence, others, with skeptical eyes, wondered if it might not be the result of fear and the overactive imagination of an impassioned youth. Still, the account could not be ignored, as it inexplicably coincided with other manifestations occurring in the vicinity. In neighboring villages, rumors of disturbances in nature, such as the unsettling sound of winds that did not belong to the season or the strange glow appearing over the desert, began to spread, creating a network of signs interwoven with the ancient prophecies. The group's atmosphere then shifted from a simple meeting for discussion to a scenario where spirituality met the fear of the unknown. The master, with eyes that seemed to hold the memories of past ages, turned his attention to the young man, and in a calm and determined voice, said that such experiences were not mere coincidences, but part of a grander symphony unfolding silently. He suggested that this phenomenon, so inexplicable and vivid, was a manifestation of the rupture between worlds, a sign that the veil separating the visible from the invisible was indeed becoming permeable. As the nights went on, the accounts multiplied. An artisan who worked carving sacred figures revealed that he had experienced intense dreams in which he saw images disintegrating and reforming into shapes he had never imagined. In his reveries, the statues came to life, and ancestral voices whispered secrets about the origin of existence, indicating that time and space were merely temporary illusions designed to keep humanity in a state of voluntary ignorance. These dreams, both disturbing and beautiful, left an indelible mark on the minds of those who heard them, instigating the quest for a truth that always seemed just out of reach. In the ensuing conversations, the second of the prophecies took on increasingly intriguing contours. The idea that the physical and spiritual worlds would converge at a point began to materialize through small signs. During a meeting held in an old abandoned temple, where echoes of the past mingled with the murmurs of forgotten prayers, a group of disciples reported feeling a strange energy vibrating in the walls of the building. It seemed as if the very matter of that place, steeped in history and ancestral rituals, pulsed with a hidden force, as if it were preparing to reveal a long-kept secret. Some even reported seeing shadows moving independently, suggesting the presence of entities that did not belong to this world, but rather emerged from the recesses of existence. The unease increased as these accounts intertwined with discoveries in ancient sacred texts. Passages once read as simple parables and metaphors began to be reinterpreted in light of these recent events. Passages that mentioned open portals and paths of light and darkness assumed a literal meaning for those seeking to understand what was to come. The Master, with his usual serene wisdom, explained that Jesus' vision, when conveying his enigmatic words, had been carefully designed to awaken in hearts the capacity not only to perceive what was manifest, but also what was hidden within the folds of time. He emphasized that every symbol, every metaphor, was a key that opened doors to a deeper understanding of existence. As the tension thickened, internal conflicts began to emerge among the disciples. Some, driven by an almost mystical fervor, believed that the signs confirmed an inevitable destiny, a cataclysm that would irrevocably transform the world. Others, however, remained cautious, fearing that a mistaken interpretation of those signs could lead to a spiral of despair and chaos. Amid heated debates, there were moments of introspection in which each individual was invited to confront their own fears and to seek the truth that, according to the Master, resided not in the words of books but in the authentic living of the mystery. On one of these intense nights, the Master proposed a collective meditation, encouraging everyone to close their eyes and connect with the energy that pervaded the environment. The room filled with an almost tangible atmosphere, where time seemed to dilate and space became infinite. During that exercise, many reported sensations of lightness and warmth, as if a benevolent presence enveloped each being, guiding them along a path of self-knowledge and revelation. It was in that state of communion that a collective murmur rose, a whisper that seemed to emanate from the depths of the collective soul, an implicit message that the end, so feared and misunderstood, would also herald a new beginning. The feeling of urgency intensified as natural events began to display anomalies that defied human logic. Reports of animals behaving erratically, inexplicable meteorological phenomena, and small fissures in the ground emitting a bluish light at night circulated through the villages. Each new occurrence was seen as yet another link in the chain of events confirming the rupture foretold by the prophecies. Amid this confusion of signs, the disciples' faith became a beacon, a steadfast anchor amid uncertainty. They understood that if indeed something greater was about to happen, the preparation could not be delayed. It was necessary to remain alert and receptive to the divine messages. In the streets and markets, rumors spread as quickly as a wildfire in dry brush. Merchants and travelers, upon hearing the stories told by those who claimed to have witnessed the signs, mixed disbelief with a curious hope. For some, the possibility of a new spiritual awakening was a reason to uplift their hearts, while for others it signified a premonition of disorder and anarchy. Among the crowds, small demonstrations of faith emerged, improvised rituals seeking to invoke the protection of the heavens and the intervention of higher forces. These acts, though simple, revealed an innate need to connect with something greater, to find meaning amid the looming chaos. As time went on, the meetings in the old abandoned temple grew more frequent and intense. The walls, marked by the passage of centuries, seemed to harbor secrets that only revealed themselves to those willing to listen with open hearts. In one such session, an elder, whose memory was as vast as the sacred texts, shared a surprising interpretation of an ancient scripture. He revealed that for a long time, the wise had been warning of a convergence between worlds, a point at which matter and spirit would meet to enact a profound transformation. His words resonated like a distant echo of Jesus' prophecies, suggesting that the apocalypse would not be an end, but rather a passage into a higher state of existence where the limits imposed by form would be undone by the essence of being. Debate among the disciples grew stronger and even extended to the ethical and moral issues that the impending meeting of worlds would entail. Many wondered how humanity would react in the face of the confrontation between the visible and the invisible, and whether the announced transformation would bring redemption or damnation. In this whirlwind of uncertainties, the Master reiterated that true preparation for what was to come lay in cultivating virtue, compassion, and the ability to see beyond appearances. He emphasized that spiritual knowledge was not limited to the study of ancient texts, but manifested in the daily practice of kindness and in the courage to face one's own inner demons. The atmosphere, heavy with expectation, culminated in an almost tangible feeling that the destiny of humanity was about to be rewritten. The three prophecies, which once seemed isolated in their mysteries, now intertwined intricately, suggesting a unique narrative in which every sign, every dream, and every natural phenomenon was a piece of a vast puzzle. For those seeking to understand the deeper meaning of these events, there was no alternative but to accept the Master's invitation to dive headfirst into this ocean of enigmas, certain that the hidden knowledge present might finally reveal the truth about the world's ultimate fate. Thus, as dawn transformed the early morning, and the first rays of sun began to dispel the night's gloom, the disciples remained immersed in their thoughts and prayers. There was a conviction that at any moment the balance between worlds would be broken, triggering a series of events that would forever change the face of the earth. And even in the face of uncertainty and fear, unwavering faith and a burning desire for truth guided every step of those embarking on the spiritual journey. Every glance, every gesture, and every shared word was, in truth, a silent preparation for the moment when the veil would be lifted once and for all, revealing the essence of a universe where the end was merely the beginning of a new era. The days passed with an almost palpable intensity, and the feeling that something grand, and at the same time devastating, was about to occur began to take hold of everyone who followed the signs and the enigmatic messages. On a gray morning, when the mist seemed to envelop the world with a shroud of uncertainty, the atmosphere of expectation reached a critical point. There was a collective murmur, a whisper that traveled through the streets and fields, as if every human being were in tune with an inescapable destiny. Those who had prepared for the meeting between the visible and the invisible felt, with every heartbeat, the approach of a moment when reality would split in two, announcing the definitive rupture between what was known and what had never been imagined. That morning, as the sun attempted to break through the veil of mist, a group of disciples gathered in a place considered sacred, where the echoes of the past and the omens of the future met. The old Master, whose deep gaze seemed to pierce the limits of time, was present, and his serene posture contrasted with the evident tension in every gesture of those around him. He began the meeting with a calm voice, yet one that carried the weight of centuries of wisdom, speaking of a time when the destiny of humanity would be sealed by irrevocable choices and surprising revelations. His words, laden with a silent urgency, outlined a scenario in which the heavens and the earth were preparing to merge in an explosion of light and shadows. As the meeting continued, Each disciple shared experiences that, until then, had seemed like mere fragments of dreams and reveries. A man with tired eyes, with the marks of time etched on his face, revealed that at dusk he had witnessed a peculiar transformation in nature. He recounted how a dense mist, approaching like a silent army, was gradually illuminated by golden reflections, as if the sun itself were trying to communicate a hidden message. This vision, both disturbing and beautiful at the same time, sent shivers down everyone's spine, for there was the materialization of a symbol that, until then, had been interpreted only in the abstract. As the personal accounts mixed with interpretations of ancient texts, the master raised his hand to quiet the growing unease. He explained that this phenomenon was the harbinger of an irreversible transformation, a breaking point where the limits between the physical and the spiritual would be definitively crossed. His words evoked a mixture of fear and fascination. It was as if, suddenly, the visible world became a stage where invisible forces, long repressed, were preparing to emerge with unusual intensity. He spoke of an ancient prophecy that warned, when time becomes circular and the ages merge, man must face the truth that has long been hidden in the shadows. That message, which was once received with caution, now sounded like an inevitable sentence. The environment became charged with an electric energy, and even the walls of that ancient sanctuary seemed to vibrate with an unknown force. Reports of small tremors in the ground, accompanied by murmurs that seemed to come from the depths of the earth, were no longer seen as coincidences, but as unequivocal signs that the world was on the brink of an unprecedented transformation. Some disciples, seized by an almost delirious fervor, began to pray intensely, pleading for protection and for guidance to help them understand the true dimension of the events. Others, more introspective, immersed themselves in long meditations, trying to decipher the enigmas unfolding before their eyes, while time itself seemed to slow down, as if each second were imbued with meaning. Amid this whirlwind of emotions and perceptions, a young woman with a keen spirit and penetrating gaze, who had remained silent until then, rose to share her experience. She recounted that the previous night, while walking along the banks of an isolated lake, she felt a presence that enveloped her like a gentle breeze, yet carried with it a cutting cold. In that surreal atmosphere, she saw, reflected in the water, the image of a figure that did not belong to this world. Its eyes seemed to shine with a light that mixed sadness and compassion, and she felt, inexplicably, that this apparition carried a message of warning. "Do not be deceived," she whispered, her voice trembling. "What we are about to experience surpasses everything we know. It is as if time itself wishes to reveal its deepest secrets, and we, without choice, are part of that revelation." Her words resonated with an echo that seemed to cross the barriers of the physical world, and many present felt that this moment marked the point at which everything would change. As the young woman concluded her account, rain-laden clouds began to churn in the sky, announcing the imminence of storm. The climate, already saturated with omens, seemed to intensify, and the disciples exchanged looks filled with both fear and resignation. The master, noticing the growing unrest, spoke again in a firm yet compassionate voice. He revealed that the forces preparing to manifest were not inherently evil, but represented the eternal duality of the universe, where light can only be understood in contrast with darkness. The time has come to confront the shadows that inhabit not only the external world, but also the deepest recesses of our hearts, he declared, as the rain began to fall heavily. Every drop seemed to carry with it the possibility of rebirth, even though at first that idea appeared contradictory in the face of the moment's violence. The storm, which broke with unexpected force, swept across the landscape, and the sound of thunder blended with the clamor of prayers and the quickened beating of hearts. Amid the fury of the elements, the group dispersed momentarily, each seeking refuge and answers in the solitude of their thoughts. Yet for many, that dispersal did not signify escape, but rather an invitation to personally confront the revelations that imposed themselves as inevitable. Lightning streaked across the sky, briefly illuminating the vastness of the world, and in each flash it seemed that the truth was revealed in fragments, images of a forgotten past, visions of an uncertain future, and the constant presence of a power that transcended any human understanding. In the midst of this atmosphere laden with meanings, the master gathered the disciples once more in an improvised shelter. There, while the sound of the storm mingled with their voices, he began to speak about the nature of impending rupture. He explained that the meeting between the physical and the spiritual worlds, a moment so longed for and feared, would be marked by a singular moment in which the limits of human perception would be challenged. "It is not the end, but the climax of a journey that spans ages," he said with conviction. What many interpret as the end of times is, in fact, the apex of a process that leads us to a greater understanding, where every fragment of reality will come together to form a whole that transcends the duality of good and evil. His words, though shrouded in mystery, offered a spark of hope, indicating that the announced destruction was not a final sentence, but a profound transformation. The disciples listened attentively, but behind that apparent serenity the environment buzzed with questions and inquietude. Some wondered if they would be prepared to face the consequences of this rupture, if their souls would have the strength to withstand the revelation of truths that could shake the very foundations of existence. Others, driven by a burning desire to understand what lay beyond the veil, saw in the prophecy an opportunity to transcend human limits and merge with the essence of the divine. This duality of feelings, between paralyzing fear and the yearning for knowledge, created an inner tension that was reflected in every gesture, in every look laden with doubts and hopes. The climax was approaching, and the signs intensified. The sound of the rain, which had once been merely a backdrop, came to be interpreted as the rhythmic beating of a colossal heart, pulsing at the core of the universe. Nature itself seemed to conspire to announce the moment of rupture. Trees, once silent, trembled as if sharing an ancestral consciousness, and the rivers, in their impetuous flow, carried with them the force of past eras and the promise of a renewed future. Amid all this, the Master repeated that each phenomenon was an invitation to look inward and to recognize that, no matter how frightening the transformation might seem, it carried within it the seed of regeneration. At that very moment, when the thunder roared with a force that made even the foundations of that shelter tremble, an intense flash illuminated the interior of the room. For a brief moment, time seemed to suspend, and everyone's eyes fixed on the window, where the storm displayed a spectacle of light and shadow, of forces in collision and unexpected harmony. In the midst of that almost apocalyptic scene, the Master slowly rose, his posture firm, and his eyes shining with an intensity that mixed compassion and resolve. "This is the moment when our souls will be forged," he proclaimed, his voice laden with an emotion that seemed to echo through the winds and the rain. "Now what was once veiled will be revealed, and each of us must face the truth that has always been hidden behind appearances." The moment of rupture was not merely a passage from one state to another, but the apex of a process that demanded the courage to abandon old certainties and embrace the unknown. The disciples, in a mix of fear and determination, prepared for what was to come, aware that that instant would mark the beginning of a new era. Every face reflected the duality of feelings, the terror of uncertainty, and the hope of a spiritual rebirth. In every heart, there was the conviction that, although the end of times was announced through a profound rupture, it also carried the promise of a transformation that would allow humanity to emerge from the shadows to attain a truer light. And so, in that confluence of natural and spiritual forces, the last vestiges of the old order dissolved. The environment, once saturated with omens, yielded to an almost reverent silence, where the sound of the storm seemed to be replaced by a melody that spoke directly to the essence of each being. It was in that silence that the sense of separation between the old and the new dissipated, and the disciples felt that they were finally facing an inescapable revelation. They realized that to comprehend the depth of the transformation, it would be necessary to abandon conventions and allow the truth to unfold in its purest and most unyielding form. At that moment, each one of them cast themselves, in thought and spirit, into the abyss of uncertainty, embracing the rupture with a faith that transcended fear. What seemed to be the climax of an apocalyptic process was, in fact, the rebirth of a long-dormant consciousness, preparing to rise from the ashes of the old world and merge with the immensity of the cosmos. Every raindrop, every flash of light, and every distant sound of thunder served as a reminder that the universe, in its infinite complexity, was in constant motion, and that the end was simultaneously the beginning of something extraordinarily new. Thus, in that whirlwind of emotions and forces, the breaking point was established as the intersection between what had been and what was to come, a threshold where individual and collective destinies met to forge a new chapter in the eternal narrative of existence. The Master, with a serene countenance, led his disciples through this crossing, aware that every step taken there brought them not only closer to a revealed truth, but also to an encounter with the very essence of the divine. And as the storm continued to roar inside, their hearts prepared to embrace what was inevitable, certain that at the end of that path a new dawn awaited to illuminate the shadows that, until then, had defined human existence. Dawn arrived with a mixture of hope and fear, as the atmosphere charged with omens began to reveal a new face of destiny. Amid the fervor of recent events, the disciples felt that the hour of reversal had come, and the signs that were once enigmatic now unfolded with an unsettling clarity. The old master, whose presence had always conveyed calm and wisdom, now seemed imbued with a transcendent energy, as if a sacred fire burned within him, ready to consume the old structures of the world. In the surrounding environment, change was palpable. The winds, once gentle, had become impetuous, tearing leaves and sighs from a past that was bidding farewell. The very earth appeared to vibrate with a new rhythm, announcing that the days of transition were no longer mere omens, but an inescapable reality. In every face, unease blended with a resigned acceptance. It was the moment of judgment, not of condemnation, but of renewal, where the paths walked and the mistakes made would be put to the test. Amid this scenario, the teachings that had once seemed abstract took on a concrete form. On a hill that dominated the landscape, where the sunlight struggled to break through the dense clouds, a group gathered to witness what was heralded as the definitive turning point. Among those present, men and women of all ages sought to understand the meaning of every sign, every phenomenon manifesting with the force of an awakening. Those hours were marked by an expectant silence, interrupted only by the distant rumble of thunder and the whisper of winds that seemed to carry the voices of elders and prophets. As the group arranged themselves in a circle, the master positioned himself at the center, his eyes reflecting an intense and mysterious light. His voice, once calm and inviting, now exuded an authority that made the secrets of the universe resonate. The time has come when each one's deeds will be revealed, when the truth, once hidden, is laid bare before our eyes, he proclaimed, as those present felt the weight of his words penetrate their souls. Each syllable seemed to carry the burden of 1,000 eras, and the ensuing silence was filled with the conviction that nothing could remain concealed any longer. Personal stories, which had until then been shared timidly, transformed into intense and emotional accounts. A man, marked by scars both physical and spiritual, raised his voice to recount an episode that had changed his life. He spoke of a night when, alone in his retreat, he felt the presence of a luminous entity that confronted him with the truths of his past, revealing the moments of choice that had led him down a path of darkness. His words, imbued with remorse and newfound understanding, echoed among the listeners, reminding everyone that judgment was not a punishment, but an invitation to rebirth. Each account seemed to weave, with invisible threads, the tapestry of collective destiny, where every individual action contributed to the grand design of the universe. At that moment, nature itself intensified its manifestation. The sky, caught in a turbulent dance between light and shadow, began to open in a spectacle of unusual colors. Rays of light cut through the clouds as if announcing the arrival of a new dawn, and the sound of thunder blended with the unified pulse of beating hearts. It was as if the cosmos were revealing that beyond the apparent chaos, there existed a higher order, where every element had its place and purpose. This vision made the disciples feel both minuscule before the vastness of the universe and exalted for being part of that unique moment in human history. Observing the attentive eyes of everyone present, the Master began a series of teachings outlining the path of spiritual judgment. He spoke of the need to confront one's own failings with courage, to recognize that each mistake was a hidden lesson, an opportunity to grow and transform. His words, laden with an unexpected tenderness, touched the deepest recesses of every heart, inviting them to abandon pride and surrender to their inner truth. Judgment is not condemnation, but a passage into the light, he declared, as his voice mingled with the sound of nature in metamorphosis. It is the moment when the veil is torn asunder, revealing not only our secrets, but the essence of who we truly are. As his discourse unfolded, a series of supernatural events began to occur. In a nearby clearing, an ancient tree, a symbol of strength and ancestral memory, started to emit a soft glow, as if rekindling its vitality. Its branches, once inert, trembled with a new energy, and the leaves danced in a silent choreography. To those who watched, it was more than a natural phenomenon. It was a sign that creation itself was in tune with the call for renewal. Every being, from the humblest to the mightiest, was invited to acknowledge that change was inevitable and that the end of an era paved the way for the emergence of a new reality. Murmurs of surprise and reverence spread throughout the group, and the atmosphere began to vibrate with an intensity that transcended the physical realm. Many felt that, at that very moment, the forces governing the universe stood before them, offering a singular opportunity for redemption. Amid that transformation, the Master led a passage ritual, where each disciple was invited to express, in silence or in words, the hopes and fears that resided within them. That practice, rich in symbolism, served as a mirror reflecting the truth of each soul, allowing them to free themselves from the chains of the past and prepare for the new cycle that was beginning. Among those participating, a woman with a serene gaze and a soft voice stood out for her silent determination. She shared an episode from her life, in which she had faced a crisis that left her on the brink of despair. She recounted how, after long periods of pain and solitude, a feeling of absolution washed over her, making her realize that every hardship faced was, in truth, an opportunity to reinvent herself. Her words, filled with a truth that only experience can reveal, deeply moved those present, serving as an example for those still struggling to find peace amid the whirlwind of emotions. This personal narrative was met with silent applause and tears of recognition, as if time itself had bowed before the courage to open up to one's inner judgment. As the ritual continued, the elements joined together in a cosmic choreography. The rain, which had been falling with fury, began to transform into a purifying cloak, washing not only the earth, but also the spirits of those surrendering to the experience. Each drop seemed to carry the essence of forgiveness and renewal, rekindling the hope that even after the darkest moments, a new day could emerge. The wind, in its vibrant dance, carried with it the whispers of the ancestors, whose voices echoed as reminders that history was made of cycles, and that every end was, in fact, the beginning of a new journey. At the climax of this transformative moment, the Master raised his arms in a gesture that embraced both sky and earth, and proclaimed in a voice that seemed to come from all directions, "He who dares to confront the darkness, who has the courage to face his own truth, will find not condemnation, but liberation. For judgment is the fire that purifies, and in the flame of every heart lies the possibility of rebirth." His words resonated with a force that shook the foundations of ancient dogmas, making room for a deeper and more integrated understanding of the divine. The environment, once charged with an almost tangible tension, transformed into a scene of revelation and hope, where every soul, even the most tormented, could find the light that would guide them toward a new dawn. The impact of that moment reverberated throughout the region. People who had until then lived in the shadow of fear and doubt began to look toward the horizon with renewed perspective. Judgment, interpreted not as a sentence but as a call to transformation, became the catalyst for an inner revolution. The disciples, now more aware of their own fragility as well as their potential, embraced the idea that the end of one cycle was necessary for the emergence of something greater. Every tear, every sigh, and every word spoken at that moment stood as silent testimony to the unfolding process, a process in which the truth, once hidden, manifested in its purest form, revealing that justice and compassion were the pillars upon which the new era would be built. As the skies cleared and the sun timidly emerged through the clouds, the hearts of those present seemed to beat in unison with the very essence of life. The Master, his voice now softened, explained that this moment was only the beginning of a hard path, where every choice, every act, and every thought would need to be carefully considered. The reversal we experience today does not erase the past, but transforms it, giving it new meaning. True judgment lies in how we rebuild our inner homes, how we turn our weaknesses into bridges to the light. Thus, the message spread, imbuing each person with the conviction that rebirth was a continuous process, and that, even in the face of the most intense challenges, the divine essence remained inviolable. As the disciples dispersed, taking with them that transformative experience, the Master remained, contemplating the horizon with a gaze that blended satisfaction and determination. He knew that the journey ahead would be marked by challenges, but he was also certain that the seed of renewal had already been planted in every heart. And in the quiet that followed the clamor of the elements, one truth became clear. Judgment, far from being a final outcome, was the gateway to an era of self-knowledge, where each being would find within their own essence the light capable of dispelling the darkness that had long surrounded them. In the days that followed, the transformation that had begun that morning continued to manifest in small gestures and grand decisions. The community, once fragmented by fear and uncertainty, now found the strength to unite around a common ideal, the relentless pursuit of a new beginning grounded in truth and compassion. The Master's teachings, echoing in every thought and action, became the guide for a new way of living, where judgment was seen not as a sentence, but as an invitation to continuous evolution. And so, as the world prepared to face the challenges of transformation, each soul, marked by the purifying fire of reversal, moved toward a future full of possibilities, where the inner light could finally shine free from the bonds of the past. That moment of intense revelation stood as a turning point, a watershed marking the beginning of a new cycle in the history of those who dared to confront their very essence. The sound of the elements, the tears of relief, and the strength of transformed hearts remained as silent witnesses that even in the darkest hours, hope and renewal would always find a way to blossom. And as the world rebuilt itself upon the ruins of old certainties, the Master's voice echoed as an eternal reminder that true judgment is that which frees us, leading us toward the light of a new dawn. In the silence that followed the tumult of events, the world seemed suspended between the memory of what had been and the promise of an uncertain future, yet one full of possibilities. Gradually, the scars left by the old order began to heal, not without leaving deep marks, but serving as a reminder that every end carries within it the seed of a new beginning. The disciples, who once gathered in small groups to share the omens and revealed mysteries, now found a collective path toward the reconstruction of their souls and communities. This journey was not limited to a mere change of scenery or customs, but represented an inner transformation that resonated through generations. The intense experiences lived during stormy nights and meditation sessions left an indelible mark on every heart. Many of those who had felt the clamor of the elements and the touch of the sacred came to understand that the announced end was not a definitive sentence, but a necessary passage to a fuller and more integrated existence. In this new cycle, judgment, once feared, was reinterpreted as a process of purification and revelation, where human mistakes and frailties were transformed into learning and strength. Those who embraced this change felt blessed with an expanded vision, where spiritual knowledge was not confined to written words, but manifested in the daily practice of empathy, compassion, and unconditional love. As the community rebuilt itself, the teachings of the old Master, which now seemed to echo with the force of 1,000 ancestral voices, became a luminous guide for all. He insisted that every human being, regardless of their journey, carried within themselves the potential for redemption and transformation. This message reverberated in conversations in public squares, in sharing circles, and in solitary moments of reflection. Gradually, the remnants of a rigid dogmatic faith gave way to a more fluid and inclusive spirituality, in which personal experience and the sincere search for truth were valued above empty rituals. Thus, the old division between the sacred and the profane began to dissolve, giving way to the perception that the divine manifested in every act of kindness, in every look of understanding, and in the capacity to forgive. Over the days, landscapes once marked by an atmosphere of desolation underwent a silent metamorphosis. The trees, which had twisted under the fury of the winds during the rupture, now raised their branches like welcoming arms, symbolizing the renewal of life. The rivers, which had once surged with the force of erupting eras, assumed a serene course, reflecting the clarity of a sky that was beginning to open up. It was as if nature itself, a silent witness to human dramas, surrendered to the harmony of a new cycle, where every element found its place in the grand mosaic of existence. Amid this scene of rebirth, individual stories continued to unfold with the power of memories that inspired both pain and hope. A woman who had long carried the sorrow of irreparable losses found in the renewal of the fields a reason to believe that time, even if relentless, possessed the gift of healing. She recounted how, during an early morning walk, she saw the dewy shimmer on the leaves like tiny jewels, and felt that each drop was a blessing that washed away sorrows and prepared the spirit to receive the light. Her simple, tender words moved those who listened, prompting many to wonder if this was the true message of the Master, the ability to transform pain into strength and an end into a vibrant new beginning. The elders, who had witnessed countless transformations throughout their lives, shared their stories with a wisdom that only time can bestow. They recalled days when traditions seemed immutable and the world followed a predictable rhythm, And now, facing a horizon full of possibilities, they taught that every closed cycle carried with it the opportunity to learn and grow. In their conversations, time was no longer seen as a straight line leading inevitably to decline, but as an infinite circle, where every end was, in fact, the prelude to a new beginning. This vision, deeply rooted in ancient traditions, resonated with the message that true legacy is not measured by the length of life, but by the intensity with which one loves, forgives, and seeks truth. As the days turned into weeks, and the weeks into months, the community organized itself to rebuild not only their homes, but also the bonds that united them. The faith that had been challenged by the winds of change now manifested in acts of solidarity, and in the cultivation of a spirit of fraternity that transcended differences and disputes. There was a collective awareness that the past, with all its pains and errors, was a stern yet indispensable teacher for writing the future with the ink of wisdom. In this climate, every action was understood as part of a grand divine project, where personal transformation reverberated in benefits for all humanity. The new era that was unfolding was not without challenges. On the contrary, remnants of the old order still emerged in moments of doubt and uncertainty. However, the teachings that once were only mystical words now materialized in concrete attitudes. The disciples learned that rebirth was not a permanent state, but a constant quest for improvement. Every day was an opportunity to question, to learn, and above all, to love with the intensity of those who know that existence is a sacred and fragile gift. Thus, the legacy of the three prophecies, proclaimed with such fervor and mystery, transformed into a guiding light for those who wish to transcend the limits imposed by fear and ignorance. On long afternoons, as the sun bid farewell on a horizon tinged with warm, soft hues, small groups gathered to share the achievements and challenges of their new reality. Amidst contained laughter and silent tears, each account was celebrated as an act of courage and resistance. The history that had long been marked by conflict and division now found new contours in a mosaic of experiences that celebrated the diversity and complexity of the human being. Every person with their scars and victories contributed to the construction of a collective narrative where love and wisdom intertwined organically and inspiringly. On one such afternoon, as twilight settled with its ephemeral beauty, the old master, still the spiritual anchor of the community, gathered everyone around a bonfire. Beneath the starry canopy of the sky, he spoke with the conviction of one who had traversed his own abysses and emerged transformed. His words were simple, yet carried the depth of an experience that transcends ordinary understanding. Every end is, in truth, a new seed waiting to germinate. Do not fear the judgment that is before you, for it is through it that the soul is purified and strengthened. May this new cycle be marked by the courage to love, the wisdom to forgive, and the determination to build a world in which the divine manifests in every act of kindness. Those moments endured in the memory of the listeners as an anthem to resilience and the human capacity to reinvent itself. The Master's words became a mantra, silently repeated by those who wished to eternalize the message of hope and transformation. Gradually, the feeling of unity deepened, and the community discovered that by sharing burdens and joys, they were building not only a new present, but an eternal legacy that would echo through future generations. As time followed its natural course, the sense that the world was renewing itself spread to the most distant corners. The sound of laughter, conversations full of dreams, and everyday celebrations took on new meaning, for they were seen as manifestations of the inner light that had been awakened in every being. What was once perceived as an end now revealed itself as the opening of a door to a deeper understanding of what it means to exist. The community, once divided by the shadows of fear and doubt, now walked together toward a horizon where truth was present in every look, in every gesture of affection, and in the courage to live intensely. And so, as the cycle of life completed its eternal dance, the echoes of the three prophecies transformed into a song of rebirth, where the past, present, and future converged in a harmonious symphony. The impact of this transformation was not confined to the borders of that group or that land. It spread like a gentle breeze that caresses the face of those who dare to dream, reminding everyone that true revolution begins within the heart and is reflected in the world around us. In the quiet of a serene night, when the stars twinkled with the promise of a new dawn, every soul that had participated in this journey understood, with a silent clarity, that history never ends, It transforms, reinvents itself, and perpetuates an eternity of gestures and emotions. And in that moment of silent communion, the certainty was affirmed. The legacy of Jesus' prophecies, revealed in such an enigmatic and profound way, would be the foundation of an era of light where humanity, renewed in spirit and truth, would forever walk toward the divine.